Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskrityam.
Narayanam Namaskrutyam.
Naran Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Tato Jayamudirayet.
Tato Jayamudhirayet.
Nashtaprayasu Abhadresu.
Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya.
Bhagavati Uttama Sloke.
Bhagavati Uttam Sloke.
Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki.
Bhaktir Bhavati Nashtiki.
Reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 15, titled The Yoga of the Supreme Person. And the verse number today is verse number 5. Nirmana Mahojita Sangadosa
Nirmana Moha Jitsanga Dosha.
Adhyatmanitya Vinivrita Kama
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivrutta Kama.
Dvandair Vimukta Sukha Dukha Samjhar
Dvandvai Vimukta Sukadukha Sanganai.
Gachanti Amudha Padam Avyam Tat.
Gashyanti Amuda Padam Avyayam Tat.
Nirmana Moho Jita Sangadosa
Nirmana Moha Jitsanga Dosha.
Adhyatmanitya Vinivritya Kama
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivrutta Kama.
Dvandar Vimukta Sukha Dukha Samjhar
Dvandvai Vimukta Sukadukha Sanganai.
Gachanti Amudha Padam Avyam Tat.
Gashyanti Amudaha Padam Avyayam Tat.
Any Prabhujis, Matajis?
Nirmana Moha Jitsanga Dosha.
Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosa
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivrutta Kama.
Adhyatmanitya Vinivritta Kama
Dvandai Vimukta Sukadukha Sanganai.
Dvandar Vimukta Sukha Dukha Sanjay
Gachanti Amuda Padam Avyayam Tat.
Gachanti Amudha Padamavyayam Tat.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare.
Anyone else would like to read the sloka?
Hare Hare, Hare Krishna.
Nirmana Mohajita Sangadosa
Nirmana Moha Jita Sangadosa
Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama
Adhyatma
Nitya
Nitya
Vinivritta
Vinivrutta Kama.
Kama
Dvandair Vimukta Sukha Dukkha Samakir
Dvandvair Vimukta Sukha Dukha
Sukadukha
Sanjay
Sanganai.
Gacchantya Amudha Padam Abhyayam Tat.
Gachanti
Gachanti
Amuda
Mudha
Padam Avyayam Tat.
Padamavyayam Tat. Word by word meaning. Ni, without.
Ni, without.
Mana, false prestige.
Mana, false prestige.
Moha, and illusion.
Moha and illusion.
Jita, having conquered.
Jita, having conquered.
Sangha, of association.
Sangha, of association.
Dosa, the faults.
Dosha, the fault.
Adhyatma, in spiritual knowledge.
Adhyatma, in spiritual knowledge.
Nitya, in eternity.
Nitya, in eternity.
Vinivrita, disassociated.
Vinivruta, disassociated.
Kama, from lust.
Kama, from lust.
Dvandai, from the dualities.
Dvandai, from the dualities.
Vimukta, liberated.
Vimukta, liberated.
Sukha dukkha, happiness and distress.
Sukha dukha, happiness and distress.
Samyai, named.
Sammai, name.
Gachanti, attain.
Gashanti, attain.
Amudha, unbewildered.
Amuda, unbeliever.
Padam, situation.
Padam, situation.
Avyayam, eternal.
Avayam, eternal.
Tat, that.
That, that.
Translation by His Divine Grace Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Those who are free from false prestige,
Those who are free from false prestige,
illusion,
illusion,
and false association,
and false
false
association,
association,
who understand the eternal,
who
who
understand
understand
the
the eternal,
who are done with material lust,
who are done
who
with
are done
material,
with material lust,
who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress,
who are freed
who
from the
are freed
dualities of
from the
happiness and distress,
dualities of happiness and distress,
and who unbewildered
and who
and
unbewildered
who unbeliever
know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person,
know how to
know
surrender
how
into
to
the Supreme
surrender
Person,
unto the Supreme Person,
attain to the eternal kingdom.
attain to the
eternal
kingdom.
kingdom.
For the sake of saving some time, can any Prabhuji or Mataji would like to read this page?
The surrendering process is described here very nicely. The first qualification is that one should not be deluded by pride, because the conditioned soul is puffed up, thinking himself the lord of material nature. It is very difficult for him to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should know by the cultivation of real knowledge that he is not lord of material nature. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord. When one is free from delusion caused by pride, he can begin the process of surrender. For one who is always expecting some honor in his material world, it is not possible to surrender to the Supreme Person. Pride is due to illusion. For although one comes here, stays for a brief time, and then goes away, he has the foolish notion that he is the Lord of the world. He thus makes all things complicated, and he is always in trouble.
Thank you, Prabhu. Anyone else would like to read this page?
The whole world moves under this impression. People are considering the land, this earth, to belong to human society, and they have divided the land under the false impression that they are the proprietors. One has to get out of this false notion that human society is the proprietor of this world. When one is free from such a false notion, he becomes free from all the false associations caused by familial, social, and national affections. These faulty associations bind one to this material world. After this stage, one has to develop spiritual knowledge. One has to cultivate knowledge of what is actually his own and what is actually not his own. And when one has an understanding of things as they are, he becomes free from all the dual conceptions such as happiness and distress, pleasure and pain. He becomes full in knowledge, then it is possible for him to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Thank you, Prabhu. Let's all chant together. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namo Sri Chaitanya Manovistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaiham Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yutapadakamalam Sri Guru Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Sri Vishakha Vitamscha हे
हे
कृष्ण करुणा
कृष्ण
सिंधु
करुणा
दीन
सिंधु
बंधु
दीनबंधु
जगतपते
जगत्पते
गोपेश
गोपेश
गोपिका कांत
गोपिकान्त
राधा कांत
राधाकान्त
नमस्तुते
नमस्ते
तप्त
तप्त
कांचन
काञ्चन
गौरांगी राधे
राधे
वृंदावनेश्वरी
वृन्दावनेश्वरि
वृषभानुसुते
वृषभानुसुते
देवी
देवी
प्रणमामि
प्रणमामि
हरिप्रिये
हरिप्रिये
वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभैव च
पञ्चकल्पतरुभ्यश्च
पतितानां
पतितानां
पावनेभ्यो
पावनेभ्यो
वैष्णवेभ्यो
वैष्णवेभ्यो
नमो
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 नमः।
जय श्री
जय
कृष्ण
श्री
चैतन्य
कृष्ण चैतन्य
प्रभु
प्रभु
नित्यानन्द
नित्यानंद
नित्यानंद
श्री
श्री
अद्वैत
अद्वैत
गदाधर
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 श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त
शिवासादि
वृंद
गौरभक्तवृन्द
गौरभक्त वृंद
हरे
हरे
कृष्ण
कृष्ण हरे
कृष्ण कृष्ण
कृष्ण
हरे
कृष्ण
हरे
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 राम
हरे
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 राम
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 हरे राम राम
राम
राम
राम
हरे
हरे हरे
हरे।
नीलाचल निवासाय नित्याय
त्याय
परमात्मने
परमात्मने
बलभद्र
बलभद्र
सुभद्राभ्यां
सुभद्राभ्यां
जगन्नाथाय ते
जगन्नाथाय
नमः.
ते नमः।
Thank you so much for joining this Sangha. And today we are starting chapter 15. Last time, a week before Gita Jayanti, because last Saturday we had the celebration of Gita Jayanti, where in the temple we recited all the 700 verses of Bhagavad Gita. But prior to that, we had a discussion here where we discussed the summary of chapter 14. And now we are embarking on chapter 15. And chapter 15 is a very powerful chapter, and it is titled The Yoga of the Supreme Person. Yoga means how to get into union. And in order to get into union with the Supreme Person, what are the traits? What are the qualities? What we are supposed to do, what we are not supposed to do? And this chapter, the way Srila Prabhupada has written it in such a beautiful way, and he has provided a comparison in the beginning of the chapter. So we have to understand, in order to recognize the importance of chapter 5, we have to understand some of the key tenets Srila Prabhupada is emphasizing in the form of a background. So this background, as you can see, this is the spiritual world where the Supreme Personality of Godhead is there in the Golok Vrindavan, and he's residing or standing under a banyan tree in the in the Golok Vrindavan in Krishna Loka. And the material world is actually a reflection of that banyan tree. So you have this water which is in the margin of the land and water, and the spiritual world is referred as where the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides, and he is now standing, and the reflection of that is the material world. And as you can see, the reflection is essentially the root of the tree is right here, where you see Brahmaji who is sitting here. So in the material world, we have Brahmaji who is the top of the reflection, and in the top in the tree where you have the roots, then there are um, personalities who are around Brahmaji, like the demigods, as you can see. And slightly lower than the reflections is the person who is entangled in these branches of the tree. And towards the lower part of the tree, there are animals who are, pious animals in a way. And then there are animals which rely on um, ignorance, and they are feeding from other animals and birds. So as you can see, the material world is actually a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And in there, people, as Srila Prabhupada has written so beautifully around trying to have the proprietorship around familial items, like within the family, they would like to have proprietorship or nationality. As you can relate to, there's a war going on right now, and there is a fight for the sake of nationality, and they're all fighting for economic development. In the beginning, it starts with liberation, Vedic hymns, but it's once it becomes very misunderstood, then people get entangled with the gunas, and the gunas prompts them to have economic development, and And as you can see beautifully, it talks about how the attachment and gets into, and the person feels like he is the owner of this entire material world, and then he tries to impose proprietorship, that this land belongs to me, this family belongs to me, this company belongs to me, the sense of proprietorship. So we have to understand this beautiful picture very carefully to recognize the importance of this verse. So, as you can see, the material world is a perverted reflection. And the top, you have demigods, but as you go lower in the chain, you have the element of gunas taking over from mode of goodness to uh, uh, to passion, to ignorance. So the way we have to understand this is through this banyan tree, where you see the reflection, and the reflection is upside down. And there uh, you have the spiritual world where Srimati Radharani, as the consort of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is there in Golok Vrindavan. But in the upside down material world, which is the perverted reflection, you have the demigods, which are at the top of the tree, and human beings are in the middle branches entangled, and then the animals are in the lower branches. And on the right, as you can see, this man is trying to disentangle, because he's caught within the twigs and the trees with the weapon of attachment. He's totally attached, and he's trying to get closer to the root of the tree through the demigod process to go back to Golok Vrindavan, but he's trying to cut this. So we have to kind of dig deep, dive into this. So as you can see in this reflection, there is a desire which is really playing here. And then people want to know Vedas. And uh, that is where it is mentioned that people have unfavorable desires, the desires which takes them away from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when people start knowing Vedas, they know it the two ways. The unfavorable way, where they're attached to the rituals of the Vedas, and which is essentially the green leaves of this banyan tree. But later, the green leaves turns dark, and then the right knowledge of the Vedas is to cut the attachment to the material world, which this person is trying to do vigorously. And that the branches, as you can see here, in the poverty reflection, represent the planets. There are different planets, and you have different demigods who are running the planets. And then the tree is nourished by the three modes, or the three gunas, and the twigs, the sub branches, are represented as sense objects. And the secondary roots extending is binding the society with our fruitive actions, trying to desire to get some fruit out of it. And the subsidiary roots are representing suffering and sense enjoyment. And then the fruits of the tree is whether you do dharma or artha or kama or moksha. Even if you end up doing dharma, it is still the fruits of the tree. And then the tree is eternal because it is a reflection, but this person is trying to disentangle uh, from the axe, with the axe of detachment, so that he can go and advance to this. So the yoga, as we start talking about the unison of a person with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, through the different processes which are laid out. We talked about, how to recognize and get to the Supreme Personality of Godhead through jnana or karma or bhakti in the prior chapters. But as you can see, the the technicalities around this tree is so relevant. So with that technicalities, we can deep dive into the essence of the bird. So that I wanted to give you a brief idea about the background on which we are going to discuss the outcome of this activity. So here Krishna is saying nirmana Moho jita sanga dosa. That means um, mana and moho. So people have the sense of false prestige and illusion that they control this entire world, and that is due to our false association. Most of the time we associate with the directors of a company or senior directors of a company, or or people who rule the social structures, or the prime ministers of the world. So when we interact with them, because of this false association, we have a sense of illusion. We have a sense of false prestige. Sometimes, there'll be somebody in India who would be knowing a IAS officer. He is not a IAS officer, but by virtue of his relationship or an indirect relationship with that IAS officer, he would have this false prestige that he weighs and wields sufficient power. And then Krishna goes on to say, Adhyatma Nitya Vinivritta Kama. Then that means those who understand the Supreme, they're pretty much done with the material lust. They really have realized then this material happiness, this material gold, bank balance, or the houses are not going to help them in reaching or understanding the eternal. So there, Krishna goes on to say in the third line, Dvandar vimukta sukha sangha shamne. That means they are dvanda, they are not bewildered, dvanda, they're not bewildered. And they're not bewildered by what? Sukha dukkha. Is in various earlier chapters, Krishna mentions to Arjuna that this happiness and distress, sukha dukkha, are like sita usma. They are like winter and summer, and they are like changing dresses. So this happiness and distress, if you have understood the prior chapters, the people do not get happiness with sukha, and people do not get distress with dukkha. So what is happening here, we have to recognize that once a person goes on to achieve success, he realizes that he has achieved success by virtue of his hard work. But after gaining success again and again and again, he thinks that the success is mine. And after that, if for some reason with the competition, with his lack of hard work, or with whatever, um, he doesn't become first in the class, or he doesn't succeed, what does he do? He recognizes that he was the proprietor of this position, that he was first in the class, but by virtue of whatever, he couldn't become the first person in the class. So he is fearful that that proprietorship is taken away. And then when the proprietorship is taken away, he's engulfed in dukkha. And then when he's engulfed in dukkha and frustration, he does suicide. This is a very general thing, because once a person ends up tremendously engulfed with the happiness, 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 he becomes acquainted with this happiness, and he or she cannot take distress at the time of a challenge. And that's the reason why they end up doing suicides or divorce or whatever, whatever, whatever. So the thing, what Krishna is saying in this third line is, these kind of personalities, these kind of traits, they are beyond the dualities of happiness and distress. So whenever a devotee gets happiness, he thinks it's the prasad of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not because of our deeds that we have become first, or we have been getting promoted, or we are getting somewhere. It is because of the kindness and the kripa of the Supreme that we got to where it is. And at the time of crisis, at the time of failure, the devotee thinks that this is also a prasad of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When it's a prasad from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, why become distressed? Sometimes he gives us rasgulla and gulab jamun, and sometime we get dal roti in the temple. But we treat the prasad exactly the same way, whether we get rasgulla or gulab jamun, which recognizes, which can be compared with happiness, and dal roti. Sometimes when there is not enough volunteers or our finances in a temple are on the decline and we get dal roti, we should take it as the prasad of the Lord and we don't complain. And and that is when the person doesn't have any dvanda, any bewilderment. Dvandar vimukta sukha dukkha samnir. And then Krishna goes on to say, Gachanti amudha. Amudha means one who is not mudha. Mudha is foolish. Gachanti amudha. And here amudha is defined as unbewildered in this case. But mudha is somebody who is foolish. And now amudha means who is not foolish. One who is unbewildered knows how to surrender. So in order to get to the process of surrender, we have to do some sequence of things. Whenever you want to get 100 marks in maths, you have to do some steps right. Otherwise, you can't get it right. So you have to, get the proof, quote the axiom and do some measurements and do some equations, and then you get it right. Likewise, in order to get to the surrendering process, which this verse is telling us, in order to get to the surrendering process, the surrendering to a guru or surrendering to the supreme, let's take the example of Arjuna. He didn't want to fight, right? So in order to surrender at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, he had to go through a process of letting go, right? What did he let go? He talks about, in this verse, we talked about false prestige, right? Here, we talk about false prestige, and Srila Prabhupada gives a beautiful example in his purport where he talks about trying to have proprietorship around familial, trying to have a control over the familial things, trying to control over the social things, and trying to control about the national affections. And with the war going on, you pretty much can recognize that people had that sense of proprietorship, and this belongs to us. And if there is a threat to my existence in this geographical thing, I have the license to destroy somebody else. And this is the reason why the lack of understanding of Bhagavad Gita in these countries is is causing tremendous amount of fights, economic sanctions, um, and and steps, which is leading to it. So here, Arjuna, when he didn't want to fight, he became so much humble that he was ready to beg. He said, I want to beg but not fight. You recall the first, second, third chapter where this was discussed? So he had to let go the false prestige, which Krishna is saying in this verse beautifully. So we have to just relate to some of the anecdotal happenings, then we'll understand this verse very. And he had to let go illusion that, you know he's an archer, and and if I start killing, then I will make a lot of widows, and these widows will contaminate themselves by getting married uh, to someone else, and that will provide the pollution. And he was getting into the random thoughts, the illusory thoughts. So he has to let go all those illusions, and then he had to let go the false association. He had to let go the feeling that Bhishma is his grandpa, and he had and Dronacharya is his guru, and he has to basically let go stuff which was preventing him from fighting, and that false association has to be let go. And then he was ready to beg, and they were ready to get 5 villages. Forget about Hastinapur. He had to let go everything, including the material lust. And then he had to let go and understand the freedom from the dualities of happiness and distress. Sitosnu sukha dukkhada. That means he has to let go the fact that the happiness and distress are like Sito and Ushna, winter and summer. And once the freedom from these dualities in his mind was recognized, he was basically getting ready to become unbewildered. He he was in this case, Krishna is referring to unbewildered as amudha. That means he mudha means foolish. So he became unbewildered. He let go all the foolish things from his mind, which are essentially the prior ones, and then he started having faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead towards the later chapters. And 15th, we're coming to the end of Bhagavad Gita with 18 chapters. And then he started the process to surrender and pick up his bow and arrow to shoot. So the surrendering process is very nicely laid out in this verse. The surrendering to a guru or surrendering to a supreme. We have to let go all this false prestige, illusory thoughts, false association. Try to associate as much as possible with like-minded devotees who are trying to surrender at the end of the day. First, we have to recognize that surrender to the Supreme is something which we are going to read in chapter 18. But in order to get to surrender, there are some steps, and we have to free from the dualities of happiness and distress, not and recognize that that's a prasad of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And after all these things happen, you start to have a strong faith in the Supreme, and that lets you get to the. So whenever you think about this practical aspect of this verse, think about this perverted reflection of the material world, which is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, and through that you uh, try to uh, get rid of the pollutants which are stopping you from the process of surrendering, the false prestige, illusion, the false association, and material lost. And with the process of discussing it again and again, once and more we hear about it, you hear it from a bona fide source, which La Prabhupada, the founding Acharya, explaining that stop having the sense of proprietorship, stop having a sense that you are the husband of the house and you can control the house, or you are the wife of the house, you can control the house. More we indulge in sharing, less we indulge in being a proprietorship, wielding proprietorship, we will gain the sense of surrendering, and we will not be affected by pleasure and pain, as La Prabhupada is saying. And then these steps will get us closer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The act of surrendering will start. So we can go on and on, but would like to open it up for some discussion and hear your comments, or if you have any correction or any reflection, which will help all of us in the process of uh, getting to the process of getting ready for surrender. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Any comments, Prabhuji, or any thoughts, any reflections you would like to discuss? Was this verse echoing in your mind in terms of as you spend time in Krishna consciousness, in hearing about Bhagavad Gita, and in the process of chanting, reading books, is this verse giving us a practical way to start the process of surrendering with humility, with an attitude of gratitude? Or is this more like a, a mundane, as you know, that this is a spiritual science? So, in these verses, Krishna is giving very, very practical viewpoints of how to surrender to Him. And He, being the Supreme Person, knows. And in this verse, if you think, we come for 60, 70, 80 years and we think these things belong to me. There'll be people who will be really building houses for the next 3, 4 generations without recognizing that they have come and there's a very short time they're going to stay here. And after the short time, they are going to go back to wherever they came. But the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is eternal, He is going to be there. We cease to always recognize the fact that we have the proprietorship, and that causes conflicts, that causes challenges, without recognizing that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was there before us and He will continue to be there after us. We cease to surrender. And that act never lets us understand the fact that we need to surrender at some point. Surrendering in every step of the way, whether in familial matters or in countries' nationalist interest, it is always good, because look at how much surrender is not, should not be confused with a meek, weak aspect. We're talking about surrendering in terms of values, a value proposition where it helps us being stronger. We are not surrendering to some Tom, Dick, Harry, or someone. We're trying to surrender through to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So it needs a culture, it needs an etiquette, it needs some humility, and these are the steps the Supreme Personality of Godhead is so beautifully explaining. And with the help of a founding Acharya who explains through these purports such deep matters, I think it will help us in our aspirations to surrender. Any comments, Prabhu? Any questions? I think we may have.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavat Pranam Prabhu. Yes, you crystal clearly you compare that spiritual world and material world. That picture, that picture you shown, and analogy you described clearly, crystal way. Clearly you described, Prabhu. Very beautiful. I that like that presentation, everything as always, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare
And it's not easy, Prabhu. You and me have spoken. It's not easy to surrender to our, um, because we have a propensity to believe that some of the thoughts, some of the views we have is so strong. Sometimes it is very difficult. But as we discuss this again and again and again, we have a culture built into surrendering. Initially, we may not be surrendering, but after being in this process, being in this Krishna conscious movement, we understand that we have to soft, we have to mellow down, and these things makes us a better human being at the end. And when and that really, so Krishna consciousness is just not teaching us things which are only helping us in sadhana, but it's also helping us in our day-to-day lives. So that
Yes, so correct, Prabhu, so true. And yes, it is very difficult part, Prabhu. Sometimes we know that know the things that everything comes from Krishna, among everything is property of Krishna. Everything things are property of Krishna, but still now I see that sometimes we're thinking that yes, it is property of Krishna, but at the time, sometime, the examination time, when I tell that no, I did it,
Mhm.
I did it because I did not do it because by the Radha Samsundar mercy or Radha Samsundar empowerment, I am doing anything. So that type of consciousness till now I need, we need to develop. I mean, for me actually, I need to develop, Prabhu. Till now.
Yeah, so we are in this journey. Thank you, Prabhu, for opening on your heart and sharing in a frank way. Um, and that is where we have to recognize um, Shri Radha Sam Sundar, Lord Jagannath Baldev Subhadra Mai, and Gaur Nitai's mercy on us in recognizing that we are just uh, getting some ruchi or getting some liking to serve him, so that we are getting close in our quest so to surrender. At the end of the day, if we have not increased our taste to surrender to the supreme you mentioned, then we have lost a wonderful opportunity as a human being, because as you can see in that perverted reflection, we are somewhere in the middle, and actually we are better off than many downstairs. So we are very close. Let's focus. Let's meet every Saturday as we're doing. Let's discuss this powerful scripture. It will help us, and it will help our relationships in the long run. Thank you,
Uh,
Prabhu.
sure, Prabhu. Dandavat Pranam. I apologize, Prabhu. Last couple of weeks I did not able to join. I was not able to join, but I'll try to continue to join this program. I like this, Prabhu. Really.
Thank you, Prabhu. Any other comments from anyone else, or any even Ashish Prabhu, or Ashish Karuna Jagannath Prabhu, or anyone else would like to add?
Hare Krishna. I wanted to add one thing that was coming into my mind. I was looking into this Nirmama and Moho part here. This Moho means, like sometimes we demand that these things are mine. Yes, I am proprietor. Like sometimes it happens so much that we realize that we need help, but we have some kind of, thing which is prohibiting us to tell that we are not strong enough to tell that we need help. Forget about taking help from Krishna. Like if we are not able to take help from our near and dears, sometimes we realize that yes, I cannot do this alone. But if somebody will tell, can I help you? We'll tell that no, I think I'm okay, I can handle it. But it's okay sometimes, to take help from others. So if with humility we take help from others, someday we can build it that, like we can take help from Krishna also. Just like a leaf, like now fall season, so many leaves are moving around here and there. The leaves are basically pretty weak. The wind is basically blowing it from one side to the other side. So we can compare this. We are just like this little leaf. So this today, this material attraction is there. We are running one side. Tomorrow we get run in the other side. But as long as somebody is holding us, the leaf, right? The leaf is not moving here and there. So similarly, if we have this anchor of Krishna, then we're kind of staying protected. So with this humility, if you take help from Krishna, I think, like this nirmama and this moha part, I think we can overcome. So that I just wanted to add here.
Right, right. Yeah. So very nice. So we have this false prestige, nirvana, mana, and because of this false prestige, we don't seek help. That if I start seeking help, it will be considered that I am weak, and that illusion, moha, false prestige and moha. Once we conquer that, once we overcome that, and how you conquer? Exactly like what we're doing today, sangha with association. Then we will get benefited. So we should not feel anytime we have sadness, please share with your fellow devotees. Share with this sangha in a way which can give you solace in the form of discussing some technique which they have practiced after reading Bhagavad Gita, and that'll, so always try to share, and more you share, we get enriched by someone's knowledge about Krishna consciousness. And knowledge of Krishna consciousness can only clear our doubts, and it will only cut the ignorance from our hearts and help us uh, in the long run, in the process of surrender. Any other comments, reflections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Dandavata.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhuji. You explained really very well. The three examples that you have given on the past slide, that was really very well. You explained. So just wanted to add one point, Prabhuji. So there is one more verse, Prabhuji, right? Where the process, there are 6 links of surrender, right? Like I don't remember the exact verse. So both are actually, if you see the theme is same, right, Prabhuji? Only thing is both are almost same, right, Prabhuji? Like the one that 6 limbs and this one, like the Lord explained here, right, in this verse.
Yes. So the uh, so the context is important, right? So here here there are some cleansing activity which is recommended by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The limbs of bhakti are the love, the ruchi, the ability to gain a liking. So they're, in my mind, Prabhu, they're slightly different unless somebody comes up with a similarity. But here, as you can see, there is so much of anartha. There's so much of, there is Vedic hymns, but we all try to do the Vedic karma kanda for benefit of our personal thing, to get money, to get artha, as we discussed. So this is there. So here, there are so many, vultures who are trying to kill in a animalistic tendency, and as we are degrading in our life. And in the in the top you have demigods, and that's the reason why a person is trying to take recourse for demigods to get benefit. So it's slightly different, but um, in my mind, but the similarities, those limbs of bhakti is around building love, ruchi, which is essentially Rupa Goswami's treatise, and that's the favoring thing. But I think Krishna is trying to provide some cleansing activity which is needed uh, before surrendering is a big thing. We think surrendering is a weak thing, but actually in our Krishna consciousness, surrendering is a big thing. That's why when person surrenders and gets a new name in the first initiation, it's a big step in his life, because he has left the process of eating or association, and is trying to uh, recharge himself, and that's the reason why he has got a new life, he has got a new name. And that's a big process, because that process is the beginning after a lot of commitment has been done, and he is surrendering. Okay, bro.
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Thank you
And
so
also
much.
we have to be always grateful, right? So whenever we wake up, right, every day morning, that we get this life due to Krishna. So I feel like I always used to complain, Prabhuji, okay, this is hot, this is cold, right? Sometimes but we have to be build something, right? We have to be always grateful, right? So whatever doing is good, we always We have to believe that this is happening due to Krishna only over here. So that mindset we have to develop. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. And recently I heard that a person, he came to Radhanath Maharaj and he said, always my kid used to be first, and at this time he became second. Radhanath Maharaj said, even becoming second is also good. So the process of attitude of gratitude or the gratefulness you mentioned is so important. Every day you wake up, as Niranjan Prabhu mentioned, have that sense of gratefulness that because of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the wind is going from your nose and you're able to breathe. A time will come when it may not be there. So it's so the feeling of or the attitude of gratitude is very important and is very significant. As you know, Hanumanji, when he went to Lanka, actually, Ravan is nothing for Hanumanji. But he wanted to set the tone that as a service provider, I'm basically giving service to Ramji. And he he did everything which what was expected of him. He didn't go a step further. He didn't go a step behind. He just did what was expected. So the mood of Hanuman and the mood of surrendering, we all should learn from Arjuna, Hanuman, so many wonderful personalities. And I thought that feeling of gratefulness, which Niranjan Prabhu spoke, is very apt for all of us. The air is flowing in our system, in our body, is purely because of the grace of the Lord of the universe. Not a single leaf can move without the sanction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And once you recognize that, we have started the process of surrendering. Any other thoughts? So let's end here. We have uh, holidays coming up. So try to distribute books. If you have sponsored Gita Yajna, you take the box of books from the temple. Don't leave it, because after some time, the boxes of books from the temple will be gone. You won't get your copy. If you have sponsored a chapter, uh, which is for $108, uh, you are entitled to get a book box. So take your book box from the temple and use this opportunity, holiday opportunity, what we call December Marathon, to give it away or to gift it. And if somebody donates something, use it for the purpose of your deities at home, or give it to the temple, so that we distribute as many books in this auspicious month of December, which is the Gita Jayanti Marathon month. And New Year, there'll be festivities, there'll be nice prasadam in the temple. We'll have midnight arati on the New Year's Eve. There is wonderful programming in place. So use the holiday mood in a act of giving, because giving is something which will give you happiness. So we'll meet next Saturday again, and we'll discuss another powerful
Prabhuji,
verse. Yes, Prabhu.
can I Gita, right? Gita books. Can I take half Odia and half English, Prabhuji? Is it possible? Or the entire box I have to take only one language?
No, no, no.
Uh,
So do one thing, Prabhu. I have sponsored 3 boxes. You have sponsored a box. So what I suggest you do is take a Odia box, take a English Gita box. You take half of Odia Bhagavad Gita and put it inside the half English book and replace it, and give the rest to me so we can share. And so the thing is, if we leave it like that, it will become difficult for others, because they are also carrying them. So you and me can work out, and
yeah.
you can take half Odia, half English, one box, and leave 3 boxes for me, because I have sponsored 3 boxes, and I will put those 3 boxes in my car. soon. So whenever you come next time, just do the splitting and you could give it to me.
Sure, Prabhuji. Yeah. Hari Bol.
Okay. Okay, Prabhu, anything else before we end? So let's offer our obeisances to the wonderful Vaishnavas in fostering the discussion of Bhagavad Gita in a systematic way by praying and chanting Vancha kalpataruvyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai Grantaraj Bhagavad Gita ki jai Shila Prabhupada ki jai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari
Hari
Bol.
Hari Bol.
Hari Hari Bol.